Next, Peter McCullough is joined by Dr. Roland Schmieder, Professor of Medicine, Nephrology and Hypertension, and Head of the Clinical Research Center at the University Hospital in Erlanger, Germany. They cover diagnosis of resistant hypertension.
Dr. Schmieder, welcome to Excel.
Hi, Peter.
I thought we'd start out the interview today having you give the listeners some standard or common accepted definitions for resistant hypertension and give us an idea among the universe of individuals with high blood pressure. How common is it?
We have two major definitions. One is more the European definition, saying patients with hypertension on 3 antihypertensive medication and their office blood pressure is still above 140/90 mmHg. These are the patients who are called resistant hypertensive patients. In the US, you also call patients who are just on 4 antihypertensive drugs, irrespective of the blood pressure, you also call them resistant hypertension. The prevalence is between, let's say, 10%, 15%. Some studies even found only 8, others 15, 17. But I would say between 10 and 15%, that's the prevalence of the treated hypertensive patient, and that's a lot.
Are there comorbidities among those with hypertension where there's a greater resistance, for instance, obesity or diabetes or kidney disease?
Yes, there have been several analyses on that matter, and it's very clear that patients who have diabetes, who have albuminuria, decreased renal function, or cardiac diseases, these are the ones where the prevalence is by far higher. These are determinants for resistant hypertension, mainly to the fact, I think, that they have long-standing hypertension with a progressive increase of blood pressure despite therapy.
Okay. So we have a patient, a primary doctor feels is resistant hypertension, and they refer them to an expert like you. And I should tell the audience that Dr. Schmieder is a nephrologist. What's the first thing that you do?
The first thing, before I just start with the whole diagnostic workup, is a very simple thing. I want to know the blood pressure on the real-life condition. The best way to do that is to do 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure monitoring with an automatic device. Just calculate the averages of all measurements we have and the blood pressure, if it's above 130 systolic or above 80 millimeter mercury diastolic, then it is called resistant. If you don't have these automatic devices available, the alternative is you do self-blood pressure measurements, and the patient take a device, a usual device, needs to be trained, and then you measure throughout the daytime the blood pressure. It's done by the patient, and again, you take averages of all measurements, and if this is above 135 over 85, then it's also called resistant. So I want to make sure that we do not have the white coat hypertension effect. That's the issue. If you have just the 5 minutes when the patient is in my office, a high blood pressure, and all the rest of the 3 months before I'm seeing the next time, he has a normal blood pressure, below 135 over 85, it is measuring itself, or below 130 over 80, it doesn't make sense. I don't react.
Okay, so your patient has been sent to you. You ordered this ambulatory blood pressure monitor. They were compliant. They got it done. And the mean systolic blood pressure over the course of 24 hours is over 130. And let's say the mean diastolic is over 80. Mm-hmm. So they clearly have resistant hypertension by your definition. It's been confirmed. What are the next steps? What are the next diagnostic types of steps?
These patients we call truly resistant hypertensive patients. And then, of course, the diagnostic procedure and workup starts. Well, the first thing, we should be aware what are the major reasons for being treatment resistant. We will start to think about, first, does the patient adhere to non-pharmacological therapy? Is there room that he can manage to lose weight or so? Is it a way to handle his treatment resistance? Also, in a very early diagnostic workup, you should think about adherence of the patient to his medication. And this is a tricky point because the patient may not confess to you that he is non-adherent. So you have maybe ask his relatives, what about, is he taking his medication? You can ask the patient whether he has a certain algorithm in the morning when he takes the medication, let's say when he's drinking coffee or after, whatever mechanism he has, but this ascertains you, yes, he has the medication integrated in his daily life activities. That's an important one.
If you have a perfectly compliant patient who's taking medication right on schedule, is it possible that just sodium alone in the diet can create resistant hypertension?
Yes, there are studies out. If you have high sodium intake, these are also patients who could become resistant, and the diuretics does not fully account for that. It's just some effect you can mitigate, but if the patient high salt is one of the reasons.
And what is high salt?
High salt is above, let's say, 10 to 15 grams salt intake, and you can measure this by 24-hour sodium excretion. This is one technique, but I think usually in westernized diet, we have an intake of 10 to 12 grams salt intake, and if it goes above 15, 20, you have high salt intake. The wish is that the patient decreases salt intake down to between 5 and 8 grams of salt, but I'm happy if I don't have these salt eaters with 15, 20 grams.
5 to 8 grams of sodium intake a day, that's a lot more than 2 grams that we used to hear about in the past. So are things becoming more liberal with respect to sodium?
That's correct. For example, it is impossible in most of the European countries to get bread without salt. So you are limited also in real world.
Can you just give us a rundown now in your practice? What are the diagnostic tests that you do to basically rule out the major causes of secondary hypertension?
Yeah, I think this is important. We so far talked about this pseudo-resistance due to bad blood pressure measurements or non-adherence. But if everything is true, the resistant hypertensive patients, we think first about the 3 most common reasons for secondary hypertension and rule this out. First thing is renal disease. So you want to have an ultrasound of the kidneys. You look again at the renal function. You look at the urine, also with a microscope to see whether there are some erythrocytes indicating glomerulonephritis. You want to go in that direction. The next thing is you want to rule out renal artery stenosis, and this is an important one because renal artery stenosis can develop throughout the course of hypertension. There are imaging techniques, duplex sonography, CT, MRI. And the third one, which you really also have to consider, is hypoaldosteronism. And the first screening test is to measure aldosterone and renin concentration in the serum in a single situation. The patient comes in looking at the ratio, and this gives you a good idea whether you need further tests down the way to look for hypoaldosteronism.
So give us an idea of the aldo to renin ratio on a blood test. What number would trigger you to do more investigation?
The aldosterone first must be high, at least above 150, better above 200, and the ratio should be above 35 or 50, depends a little bit on the measurements, but your lab will tell you what is the upper cutoff point for the ratio.
Gotcha. So both the aldo concentration needs to be high and the ratio
Correct.
should be high. Without getting into lots of details about special salt loading tests, etc., if hyperaldosterone is suspected, what types of imaging steps can be taken?
For hyperaldosteronism, there are 2 tests, the CT and MRI. Both are competing, saying both are superior. I don't have a personal opinion. I think you should go to this center, to the CT MRI center, where you have best relation and good trust and have a high quality of a new machine.
And finally, this interview is really focused on diagnostic approaches and the problem as it stands, and we won't go into treatment, but can you say a few final words about prognostic importance? If a patient has this condition, what does it mean to them in terms of their future?
I think this is a very important point, because if you diagnose true resistant hypertension, then you must consider that these are patients where the mortality rate, depending on the study you're looking at, is between 2 and 4% per year. It goes more in direction 4% if you have coexisting coronary disease or coexisting diabetes or coexisting renal function. It is between 4 and 6% if you're looking at events in the cardiac or cerebral circulation. And of course, it's a massive progressive factor for end-stage renal disease. And this is also a disaster.
Right. So for our patients with hypertension, I think they really need to understand that this can be resistant hypertension, a fatal condition. The really sensitive endpoints in cardiology are heart failure and stroke, and in nephrology, really end-stage renal disease requiring dialysis. Well, I think this has been a terrific interview. It'll be very helpful to our Excel audience. I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.